Welcome to the third online discussion within the Plan B series organized by Motovila Institute in cooperation with Municipality of Ljubljana. We're also grateful for support of our partners, Creative Eurodesk Estonia and UK England. Before we start, I would like to present Motovila. Our main goal is promotion of transnational and cross-sectoral cooperation in the cultural and creative sectors. Our core activity is also running a Creative Europe Desk Slovenia. This is a national contact point for EU Creative Europe program. We are here to provide you complete support service for the sector. We also mediate between the sector and decision makers, especially in disseminating good practices and innovative initiatives. This is also the reason behind or why we started Plan B series talks. We believe that also today's discussion will contribute to this goal of mediation between the sector and decision makers. So in June, we talked about what was the first reaction of Lisbon, Novi Sad and Ljubljana in order to support the sector during the pandemic. In October, we talked about public space with representatives of Kaunas, Rijeka and of course Ljubljana. And today we are going to talk about digital shift and culture. Today we host representatives from Coventry, Tartu and Ljubljana. I would like to welcome Tony Guillan, Digital Curator of Coventry City of Culture Trust. You know that Coventry is going to hold the title European Capital of Culture next year. And from Tartu is with us Kalle Paas, Communication and PR Manager of Tartu 2024 European Capital of Culture. And from Ljubljana, from Kino Šiška, we host the General Manager Simon Kardum. I pass the floor to our moderator, Ragnar Siil, who is international policy expert and also director of Creativity Lab.
Wonderful. Welcome to everyone. Such a pleasure. This is, as Ines mentioned, this is now already the third discussion in the series, and we've looked at the impact of crisis on our cities and our culture and creative industries from very different angles. And now, in all of our previous, and not only in these discussions, we cannot escape the issue of digitalization and the rapid digital shift, which was already ongoing before the crisis, but is now being even more accelerated and in somewhat also forced. While creatives were extremely quick in transforming many of their activities to digital formats immediately after the crisis hit Europe, we've seen now a rapid development in this sector. We've seen new ways and new formats being tested, and we have been now witnessing how using digital technologies can bring more contact, creatives to more contact with its audience. However, we also see the other side of the coin. We still, as a sector, lack ways to actually capitalize on our digital offer. We are still lacking often the working business models that support digital shift in long-term sense. And also we have to address the issue of digital divide. Not everyone in the times of digital connections and fast internets and Zoom meetings have those opportunities. And as we all know, often these are the people with less opportunities and from the areas that are maybe more impacted also by the crisis, both economically and socially. So it's not an easy topic. I would like to start with giving a floor to our three speakers, or three panelists, and really without presentations or slides, really just to firstly go through Europe from UK to Estonia to Slovenia and look at what have been now the lessons from the past 6 months. What have been, in particular, what have been the dynamics that you, in your particular places, either in your cities, in your countries, or in your networks, that you've witnessed and you've gone through yourself? we start with Tony, as already Ines mentioned. Tony works not from the European Capital of Culture, but the UK Capital of Culture, Coventry City of Culture, as a digital curator. And I really recommend after this to Google, to go to YouTube and see some of Tony's presentations. The one, We Are the Museums. I really recommend this, an example from Tate Gallery, and this was exciting. But Tony, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. My name's Tony Guillan. I'm the digital curator, as I've been introduced, for Coventry City of Culture Trust. So Coventry is UK City of Culture in 2021. The UK City of Culture programme comes out of the European Capitals of Culture programme. We're the third City of Culture in the UK run. The first was in Londonderry in 2014. The second in Hull in 2017, and now we're the third next year. And very much like the European Capital of Culture programme, the programme is very much about the role of art and culture in social change, in civic participation, and how the role of culture in improving people's lives, really. The approach we're taking to City of Culture for Coventry is very much about civic change and social change. It's very much about aligning art and culture to the goals of the city for transformation and for change. Coventry's a Marmot city, for example. For those that don't know, the Marmot Agenda by Professor Michael Marmot was all about the role of equality, the role of social inclusion, and also the role of art and culture and opportunity in health and well-being. So we're thinking about how we can reimagine what an arts festival essentially is, but we're also thinking about how we can create an arts festival for all of our communities, and how we can work directly with them to develop an arts festival that has long-term impacts. Obviously, that's massively challenging right now when you can't meet with human beings. We've made a massive commitment to co-creating our programme with all of our communities. So there's a massive, massive challenge right now. And obviously, digital plays a massive role in that. Just a little about my job. As I say, I've got the title of digital curator. Two very sticky words, I suppose, but I'm primarily focused on the role of new technologies, whether that be immersive technologies, interactive technologies, to create new experiences for visitors to our city, but also new ways to reach audiences wherever they are, whether that be at home in Coventry or elsewhere around the world. So I've been obviously thinking a lot during the first lockdown. We've just got in today in the UK into a second lockdown about what the role of technology is in the engaging audiences, but also in co-creating art, enabling artists to make art to reach broad audiences. And it's been a really, really interesting time, actually, lockdown. It's been obviously a very, very difficult time for many artists, arts organizations, and also communities. But what was interesting over the past sort of 9 months is seeing a flourishing, in a sense, of co-creation naturally and organically online. The Arts Council England, the arts body in the UK that supports the arts in England, have just published their 10-year strategy called Let's Create, and which is all about enabling arts organizations and artists to work with communities, and really with that value, that principle that all human beings are creative. And I think you couldn't turn on social media over the last 9 months and not see a flourishing of creativity. But still, that question lies of, who's being included and who's not. So, yeah, it's been a very interesting time. Thank you.
Maybe a quick follow-up, if I may. You mentioned civic engagement and civic participation, and this is often at the very core of many cities of culture, European Capital of Cultures as well. And as I mentioned, the digital shift has given us new opportunities to maybe reach new audiences as well, and maybe wider audiences. But On the other hand, as we've seen, it also these kind of connections are often different type. They are shorter. Our attention span is shorter. They are maybe less meaningful, or at least sometimes that's what's said. And also in our first discussion, when we were discussing, for example, the representative with this Ljubljana bid for the culture capital, we brought examples where small culture players, let's say a puppet theater, who is maybe usually getting 50 people, could manage maybe 15,000 people through smart digital solutions. But on the other hand, they are unable to then transform that 15,000 into physical connections or physical visits. Do you have any take on this, or any good experience from UK?
Well, in terms of converting digital engagement into physical engagement,
Exactly.
I think it's, well, right now, obviously, that's very, very difficult. You can't do that in the immediate sense. I think in terms of, we need to rethink what we mean by engagement, I think, and particularly now. And we always prioritize physical engagement. And that's usually because commercial models of arts organizations are built on people coming through the door and buying a ticket. I think there's a lot of thinking to do about how we create, as you said, much more genuine, deep, high quality engagement online in the first instance. And as you say, that's very difficult. A lot of, when we talk about social media, it's very short. It's often quite superficial engagement. And the big issue, as it has always been in the online world, is attention. Everyone is competing for the attention, and now it's all the digital space is a very, very crowded space, and now it's even more crowded. That was the big, we all realized that, something we probably should have realized a long time ago, that the online space is already huge actors, there's already a huge volume of content there. How can arts organizations, whether you be big or small, how do you fit into that? How do you cut through the white noise? And that's the challenge. And I suppose, and I've been talking a lot about this recently, it's the same message as has always been the message about how you engage people online. I think less is more. I think we really need to be economical about our digital output and really think about who we're trying to target with what, and what do we mean by engagement. Is engagement just, how many views you stack up on a video, how many people turn up to your virtual performance, or is it what they got out of it, how long they stayed? What are you trying to do when you say engagement? And I think we really need to dig down deep into that. But I think that the core message is less is more, because never before has the online world been so crowded. Everybody's trying to get everybody's attention online because there's nowhere else to get people's attention.
Absolutely, I must agree 100%, and that also we need to change the metrics now, and we need to kind of rethink our impact analysis tools. There's an example here in Estonia where a training program in a cultural heritage sector that usually maybe received 30 people, 40 people, and they didn't really want to go online because that was their kind of a part of their value proposition, value system. They had to go online, and they actually managed to get 800 people over a course of the full day course from 32 countries. And then plus the later views took the number up to maybe 2,000-3,000 people. So that's fantastic that they got more coverage than ever before. But on the other hand, if this training was 5.5 hours, and the average length of a follow viewer from your computer was 32 minutes, then you would ask, wait, but if you would be in a physical room and you would participate for 32 minutes in something that lasts for 5.5 hours, I mean, would you say that you actually taken the course, or would you get the certificate? Or, so really the numbers alone might be very deceitful. But we will come back to some of those issues. Now, that's just a coincidence, but as Estonia is one of the, at the moment at least, one of the least impacted countries in terms of COVID, and we're still very open and every business as usual as far as today, then I just happened to travel today to city of Tartu, where Kalle is joining me. I think he's around 400 meters that way, but he joins us in another room. Tartu is going to be the European Capital of Culture in 2024. We have been talking in our previous discussions about and with cities like Galway this year, and also Rijeka, culture capital this year, also cities from next year. And of course, I couldn't imagine what they are going through at the moment after years and years of immaculate planning, and then all your plans out of the window. Now you are in a very different situation because you still have time. So maybe you can also give us that point of view, that how this reality that we are going through now this year, and also the impacts that it will have for next years, have changed your thinking about culture capital title that will take place in 5 years.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ragnar. I must say that beginning of February, I visited Rijeka, which was to be one of 2 European capitals of culture this year, and to be there in the opening, which drew 100,000 people, and then see all these preparations being stopped and closed, and people let go and so on. That was super heartbreaking, and the same applies to Galway as well. So we are lucky to be in the beginning of this process, and Tartu, together with Southern Estonia, was awarded the title last year. I, as currently the communication manager, I have been with the process from the beginning. It started 2-3 years ago, and we are in our first year. Our headline is Arts of Survival, and must say that we took a headline which became very much the actual reality. We thought more about the artistic aspects, but Arts of Survival is unfortunately happening in cultural sector and in general. So for us, we are still in the planning phase, and probably during the discussion, I can open up certain aspects how we look at things. But I would also, as a kind of like opening sentence, I would perhaps surprise myself and also a few of my colleagues who are watching. Estonia is quite well known as the country of advanced e-services. I can sign documents, I can do all sorts of health and business information obtaining on the go, and it's a lot of useful services. Honestly, like if it was in Estonia, the US president would also have been selected already, because we have the digital voting and we can count the votes much quicker. But now if I look at this year and the lessons, we as the European Capital of Culture, the city of Tartu, the whole of Estonia, the cultural sector, what we have, where we are, what has happened with us, I must say that we don't have any super advanced new stuff happening over here. We don't have new platforms that would be the 22nd century, and it's surprising. On one hand, I'm very sad to say, because every crisis is an immense opportunity for new technologies, new business models. But on the other hand, I am quite happy because thinking about my life and asking my friends and colleagues, people said that, at a certain point, they watched these virtual tours and online concerts and films, but at a certain point, they switched off the computer and went to the garden, went to the forest, went to the bog, had time outside with their family. And there is some immense beauty in it. People doing kind of natural, logical things, caring about their mental health, their physical health. And this shows on one hand that, in Estonia, there is a lot of such environment which allows you to go outside and, leave the stress aside, and the screen also. But on the other hand, it also perhaps shows that, there isn't that much good offer from Estonia. Like if there is good things on the offer, people also, try to really look at what is offered. So I'm very twofold or threefold. So I hope that I will have more clarity thanks to our discussion in the coming hour.
Follow-up question to you as well. You pointed out beautifully the art of survival really being, you had this. The idea was that you come up with this idea of art of survival 2 years ago, and it's really, you had a fortune telling powers. There's another example of that in Estonia, as I also mentioned to my colleagues yesterday, that in Estonia every year is dedicated to one specific cultural area or phenomenon. So we have a year of music, or a year of film, or a year of literature. And this year, particularly, for many years ago already planned, but this year was dedicated as a digital year of culture. So it was all about celebrating the culture in digital formats. Now, we're joking that we didn't know that means that there's only digital culture this year. But Kalle, maybe you can, in few words, explain the kind of readiness. What does this mean for, let's say, cultural producers, institutions, organizations, that you come from a country, or you come from this environment where your kind of a digital service setup is quite advanced, that you are quite well positioned in terms of digital solutions, that you should be more resilient to the crisis because you are better ready. You probably have more skill set. You have people more accustomed to use digital tools, and in terms of digital cultural heritage, we are quite advanced in terms of lots of our cultural content being already online. So, do you see that helped the sector to really can survive the situation much better, or you feel that, as you mentioned, as it hindered maybe the innovation, that they might be worse off in, let's say, in 2-3 year perspective?
I think that one very important aspect is also that the coronavirus crisis has not hit Estonia that hard. It's very simple fact. It's just that the rate of infections has been lower, and also the population density of Estonia is very low, among the lowest in Europe. And therefore, we perhaps don't have that sort of crisis which would really, really close everything down. I suspect that people have always had this kind of hope in the spring, the hope that, by June we will go out and we will do all the usual things. And I must say that in summer, there were very good examples. First, I think that the Estonian cultural sector was good in asking the government to change the rules if there was statistical evidence that it's not dangerous to have an event of, 500 or 1,000 people attending. Then they lobbied for it, and they got these, let's say, like new rules or better rules from the government. Then also there were good examples of this kind of hybrid events where there would be people in the conference halls, in the rooms, such as Tallinn Music Week, and those people would be provided very good security, meaning like it's thought through how people can, stay as healthy as they were when they arrived to the venue. And also another great example was Rally Estonia, which is the FIA World Rally Championship stage, which was held in Estonia. It was announced 1 month before it actually took place. And what people could do was super good safety plan. There were like 10 different groups of people who did not meet each other, and everything was digitally organized. So we've seen kind of beautiful developments of hybrid event management. This is what has happened. On the other hand, I see also that the crisis has opened the Estonian culture market more to the global market, meaning that I, as a person interested in history, I can check the super high quality, expensive productions by top Western Europe or American museums. And I can also check the virtual tours done by Estonian museums for 2,000 euros. Now the screen is the same. I look at the same screen, but what matters is what is on the screen. And therefore, this sort of like globalization, on the other hand, also threatens our culture, because people can, choose a superior product if they speak the language, the English language usually. So it's developments and also negative developments.
Absolutely, thank you. And the government was actually quite quick to react. They came up with 25 million euro support package for the culture sector as well, which was very, very well appreciated by the sector. And also, as you mentioned, the density is very low. I've told my colleagues in the first digital discussion we had that Estonians were very, very, very frustrated with the 2-meter rule. And we waited for, we counted minutes when this is over, because then we could go back to our normal 5-meter distance. You're absolutely right. We now go to Slovenia. Simon Kardum, I've been to your place. Simon is general manager of Kino Šiška Center for Urban Culture. Amazing place. How have you coped? I already know that some of the news coming out from Ljubljana, from Slovenia, are maybe worrying. So I know that you already been hit hard also from Corona. So how have you, as your center, found yourself in this situation?
Hello to everybody from Curatorium. It is the backstage of Kino Šiška. Now it's more crematorium, I can say. But on the other side, when we talk about digital shift, we must look, and it is the global story, to the USA elections for the president. And ironically, probably Las Vegas will save the world. So it is really now global phenomena, I can say. But when I'm talking about our experience in Kino Šiška, probably, we now, all Slovenia is in the second lockdown for 2 weeks. It is very hard to survive that, because of police hour from 9 p.m. to 6 p.m. It is very hard to go to the next municipality in Slovenia. It is a kind of lockdown also. We had, all of us, the problems, of course, from March. For example, the last concert, live concert in Kino Šiška with the audience was on 5th of March. After that, it was pandemic, as you know, and so on. And yes, it is a kind of emptiness, darkness, and so on. We know that the autumn time and the time of winter, it will be even more stressful. It will be more depressive, and so on and so on. But on the other side, these obstacles are also opportunities. We know that. So, for example, we started the digitalization, I can say, of events in Kino Šiška on one case. It is Spielliga. It is the competition of young bands, Slovenian bands, taking place in our venues. And 5 years ago, we started with, it was very primitive, but still it was the production of digital event. It was the mixture, like hybrid with the physical audience, but also the digital audience. And in these 5 years, even because of COVID, we just upgraded our system, and that's very important. We were in a kind prepared, and we now have the tools how to do the quality of the performances, the digital performance, of the production of the performance with our co-workers, outsourcing co-workers. And now we are doing these events 1 to 2 on a week. And this is also very important. Why? It is important not only because we can have the global audience, but it's very important that we support the artist, we support the co-workers, our co-workers, and this is our mission also. So it's a kind of solidarity. That is the point word, I can say, also of the big book of shortlisted candidacy, which Ljubljana is for ECOC 25. So these are, this way of thinking, I think it's very optimistic to talk about that, but we must do as we are normal. It is not normal time. We know all, not only in Slovenia, all over the world. So we must be prepared for the next steps, but still the prediction of next steps is very, very unpredictable, I can say.
Simon, I would like to ask you a question, and then that question would also trickle down to Tony and Kalle.
Yeah.
In the theory of organizational resilience, there is this understanding that some organizations take on crises, challenges, as trying to cocoon themselves from the storm, wait when it goes over, and then they can bounce back when business as normal can continue. And then on the other hand, there is this understanding that you can't really bounce back because there's often nowhere to bounce back because the world has changed in the meantime. So instead you have to bounce forward. So my question is that, what do you think from your experience, how much of what you've seen in terms of digital shift is understood as or approached as temporary, something to survive the months and then go back to normal? And how much of that will, in your view, change the way we understand cultural work, cultural institutions for many, many, many years to come?
Yes, that's the question, Ragnar. It's a very tricky question. It will be also the tricky answer, I suppose. But I'm not pessimist. But on the other side, I can say that there will be no old normal as we had probably 1 year ago. So we must be prepared for the new rescue of the artistic content. We must think about the social distances. We must think about the smartness of the citizens, not about smart city, but about smartness of the citizens, smartness of using these crazy digital tools, smartness about creative of new content with digital tools. And of course, we must all be very critical about also digital solutions. So I think we must be prepared to live with COVID. Maybe not 19, but probably 25.
Maybe Kalle hopes it's before 2024. But Tony, what about you? What do you think? What will be the long-term and short-term impacts of digital shift?
I think you're absolutely right that a lot of cultural organizations, like many others, are maybe scrambling to do something in the digital space because that's the only thing they have left. And perhaps some of these are very short-termist approaches. But I think going back to what I said at the beginning, we must really think, and picking up on Kalle's point about, the art of survival. Well, there's a serious issue around people are genuinely trying to survive, and artists are struggling to survive. Work is contracting, organizations are closing. But individuals, our audiences are trying to get through the day as well. And one thing we must ask ourselves, everything we put out digitally, do audiences really want to do that? We spend all day now, most of us, online. We do anyway, but increasingly people are working online. And to be honest, the last thing I want to do is sit in front of my laptop at the end of the day. I don't want to do it. I'm sick. I'm tired. I'm zoomed out, And if I'm going to do that at the end of the day, I'm probably going to watch Netflix or maybe iPlayer. You know, I would say whether you're the biggest arts organizations in the world or the small, you're not going to compete with Netflix. Not their budgets, not what they're putting out. People are going to do that. The attention economy is now really stretched. So what our challenge is to think, what can we put out that people actually want to do that is different? And I think that's about hacking the really sort of traditional content forms, you know, thinking about, yeah, what do people want to do with their spare time? They don't want to sit in front of it. We need to move away from just thinking about screens. And I think, you know, we talked about health and well-being. Kalle talked about people wanting to go for a walk in the forest, or people wanting to go enjoy nature. How can we tell our stories? How can we present what we've got, our content, in new ways? I don't want to go to a virtual exhibition necessarily. You know, when things return to normal, I want to go back to museums. But when I'm in this, you know, in this space where I can't go to museums, I might engage with different types of content. So I'm thinking a lot about, you know, how we can create new kinds of content forms. How can we tell people's stories, even if they're very short, when they're out for a walk? You know, when thinking about new mobile media forms, whether that be, you know, podcasting, whether that be augmented reality, how can I do things that people might want to do that is different to what they're going to get from Netflix? So it's different what they're going to get from the TV channels. So I think we need to really think, you know, how we do things differently. And it is, you know, this is a radical change. Things are not going to go back to normal. Hope, you know, we will hopefully go back to days when we can go back to the theatre, go to museums and do that type of culture. But I do think, you know, this is it's already a very long period, and there's going to be some that thrive and some that don't thrive. And I think that's people who get their head around things on, you know, we have to do things differently when it comes to digital. And that's not just throwing content up. That's not trying to compete with Netflix. You know, that's trying to do things very differently. And I think one thing that I do also notice as the last point that, you know, museums, galleries, cultural organizations try to do is they try to digitize what they normally do. Stop doing that. It's all about digitizing collections or digitizing an exhibition or virtualizing an exhibition. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to do that. It's about thinking differently about how we tell stories, how we present our stories, our content. You know, stop trying to take the white cube if you're a museum and put that online. What exists in that exhibition, in that white cube, is stories, content, history, heritage. Well, how can you tell them in new ways? How can you how can you create a brilliant podcast with some of that content from that exhibition you can't do? You know, and where do you put that podcast, and when do you release it? Or, yeah, exactly. And one other thing that I'm thinking a lot about at the moment is going back to what Simon said is, you know, we need to support artists through this. And, you know, a lot of artists do work in digital, but a lot don't, but they're still great artists. So with the commissioning program we're running, is we're looking at ways of how do we form, you know, support through our festival activity, collaboration. That might be collaboration between digital technologists, digital studios, platforms, and artists with great stories to tell that are genuine creative collaborations, so that through this, we'll experiment with new content, new outputs, but hopefully we'll also have a positive impact on the sector where people are learning new ways of doing what they do. And I think that's really important.
Tony, the American Association of Libraries, the Future of Library initiative has mapped different trends that will change the way that libraries, but I think it applies to many culture sectors, maybe culture is general. They have described among many different trends two, which seem to be conflicting, but what they say is that they both have their forces. One is everything digital, as we discussed today, but then on the other side, being unplugged, that exactly as you described, people that are tired of this growing amount of digital content. They want to just unplug, take time off, go to somewhere physical, go to somewhere authentic with actual smell, actual touch. And then, you know, if you are a cultural organization, if you're a gallery, if you're a museum, you really try to kind of understand these two forces, both of them in play at the same time. So that was actually what I wanted to just follow up from you as well. Do you think that now, when in a normal way of these two sides really fighting with each other, and now with all this year, the focus being on digital, that once this is over and everything goes back to normal, if it goes, then people it swings on the other extreme, that really people want simply to go physically, do physical things, touch, smell, or do you think that the actual combination will be something, a mix of two?
Do you mean right now, or when we return?
No, when we get out of this?
Well, I think what I hope will happen during this period is, you know, we'll see some really brilliant content. And I mean, there's a definition of what digital means that I've been using a lot recently, and it's by a chap called Tom Lusmo, who used to run the UK government's digital service. And it's, you know, you applying the tools, techniques, and platforms to audiences' raised expectations. And I think what we're going to see is raised expectations. Sadly, the expectations are mainly being raised by private companies like Netflix. So I think we need to learn from them. But also, I think we're right. What we're seeing is digital fatigue. People don't, you know, there's they're overwhelmed with how much stuff. So in the short term, it's about figuring out how you provide experiences to people that they really want right now. And then when they go back to normal, we'll always want to do things physically. We'll always want to do things with other human beings. But I do think we're going to see, you know, a raising of expectations from audiences. You know, audiences are going to expect that a whole range of new types of offers, outputs from cultural organizations. And it's a real challenge to all of us, big and small, to, you know, figure that out in the short term, but also to develop that into the long term, because I don't think that's going away. I think, you know, as you say, I think we need to stop thinking about the digital space is just secondary. Actually, you know, there's a massive opportunity for that to be, you know, your primary space, you know, whether that be your headline exhibition or something else. You know, your headline output might be a digital experience that doesn't exist in your four walls. I think a lot of institutions are, you know, because of the nature of them, because of their long histories, are obsessed with their buildings, and we know buildings are very expensive. It's very sadly, many buildings are closing. But I think there is an opportunity to think about what new content forms, new ways of reaching audiences, new ways of collaborating nationally, what that can do for audiences, and what that can do for creative content, but also what that can do for, you know, sustainable business models. I mean, all of this talk about, you know, really innovative experiences, content, etc. You know, coming back to that point about digital exclusion, I think one of the ways of, it's very hard to, if someone doesn't have access to a smartphone or internet connection right now, it's very hard to think about how you can reach them. But one of the things we're thinking about in City of Culture is the role of arts organizations, particularly public arts organizations, as civic organizations, and therefore what their relationship is to other civic organizations. You mentioned libraries, community centers. Well, these are places that, you know, public arts organizations should be trying to reach audiences, because that's where you'll reach audiences that perhaps you don't normally reach. So right now, that's where you can, there was a great initiative, I think, over the past couple of years, led by the BBC, exploring how, you know, VR content could be trialed and reach new audiences through libraries. It's that type of civic partnership that we need to be thinking about right now, you know, beyond the four walls of the museum, beyond the four walls of the theatre. You know, how do we reach people via their smartphones in innovative ways, so they're not just in the house at a screen, but for those that we're not reaching, who might not have access to these technologies, how might partnership with other civic organizations enable us to do that?
What about Tartu, Kalle? Short-term, long-term changes and raising expectations of people, the audiences, with increased expectations. How can Tartu deliver?
I have a colleague who has this point or this viewpoint that real life is luxury, actual human interaction is luxury. In the future, screens will be more accessible than actual quality human interaction. I don't know if it's like a dystopia or will it happen or how it will turn out to be, but next time we can actually go to a pub and have a beer there, then this is the actual luxury in our life. Actually, when thinking about this problem or today's discussion, I called a few people and asked how are the museums coping, how is the Estonian music industry coping, and I recalled that my background is in sports management, and there is a similar process which happened in Estonian sports management in relation with the global market, let's say. When it was beginning of 90s and Estonia regained independence, also the Estonian football clubs started again. There were this kind of state-owned sports clubs, but independent cultural managers or organizations, which football clubs also are, they started from scratch. They didn't have infrastructure, they didn't have quality players, they didn't have sponsors, they didn't have brands, nothing. And around the same time, what happened was that the English top division, football top division, became the Premier League, which is the super packaged, top quality mega production. And it became a global phenomenon. Also, the other top divisions of European football, they became global. And so in the 90s, the football fans, people interested in this field of culture, they started watching the English top product or the German or Spanish or Italian top product. And so we happened to come to the situation where in Estonia there are more Liverpool fans or Chelsea or Manchester United fans than there are fans of my local club, Tartu Tammeka. And so there is this battlefield where the people say that I can watch from the screens this top product from Europe. Why should I watch on the screen this local product, local football? Why should I go to the stadium? Because I can be the fan of Manchester United. I can see the stadium, the sounds, and I can see the total top quality play in the world. And the Estonian football clubs have been struggling with this uphill battle, because how do you become cooler than the Louvre of football or the whatever top museum or theater that these global football clubs are? And the current solution, which has been developed for the last 5 years, sees that the clubs must work with the community. It's not only about the quality of play, it's about how people feel themselves at the stadium. What is there, this like client service experience? Do they meet friends there? Is there something for the families? Can the football club also help solve some social problems, fight against school bullying and other such things? It is about the cultural organization becoming more important for the community and for the people, and fostering more actual interaction between people. And if that goes well, then the goal of this campaign or program is that people are also attending the matches or watching the live broadcasts. So I see this analog, something that has happened in Estonia, and I'm looking at how my former colleagues in football are trying to solve this huge problem, which is also, something that comes along with the globalization.
Tony used the words that when the crisis hit, then the cultural people, they scrambled their stuff over the internet or threw the stuff over the internet. I think many of us has the same feeling that some of the, especially the early phase content was really also in terms of quality, and not only that you threw out whatever, but even the way that you did it in a digitally, Facebook Live, maybe bad lighting, bad sounds. It really, it was a struggle for both the creative, but also to the audience. So that takes me to another question. in order for this to be an opportunity, or to see this as an opportunity, and to come up with all these, what Tony was saying, all these innovative takes on what digitalization and this current crisis would offer us, it means that we need skills. The fact that we know how to open a computer, type in Word document, or maybe Skype with somebody doesn't make us a good content creators, which we all often found ourselves in this crisis. How do you think, let's go to Simon first, how do you think your team and the community around you and the artists, how well were they prepared in terms of the skills, the competences needed to actually succeed in this time of crisis at the moment?
I think they are prepared. We also had in the summer some questionnaire for audience, not for professionals, let's simply say, in this case. So what are the expectations of the audience? And it was very interesting which results we received. So everybody knows that it will be, and it is, a big, huge problem. But on the other side, yes, we know 90% of people, not only professionals, but also the potential audiences and so on, they just want to have the physical contact in live music and live performing arts field and so on. And one question was very interesting. So when we asked if they are prepared to pay to the digital ticket, you know, to see the event on stream online, you know, they say yes. But which is the proper price? And the proper price is about 50% of the physical ticket. So we are now we are in experimental phase now, because we have these hybrid concerts and other events with digital tickets. It is not in financial way sustainable, of course it is not. You know, without the support of the municipality of Ljubljana, we are public servants, we are public institutions, we could not do that. But still we are doing that, and that is very important. So we all, the producers, the promoters, the artists, and the owners, we must be prepared that we must have the very good equipment, with very good team with professional skills who produce the digital product, you know, not only for the local audience, but also for the global audience. Like Tony says, it is very important that the expectations of these people will be higher and higher. So we must be prepared to upgrade even our tools, and also we must have the professional teams. It is, for example, 6 cameras on one event, one concert. We will have today one streaming concert with the code, the income code from the DICE platform from UK. We have the deal about these things. But yes, they are local bands, okay? Because we cannot get international artists. We hope that it will be opened, wide open, maybe next summer. So we are very realistic in these expectations. But what I'm talking about, if you don't have, you know, all the logistic, very good sound system, very good system of lighting, this equipment just to produce the high quality digital project, you cannot do anything, you know, and that is the process, and you need money to do that. For we are privileged, in our situation because we get the public money to do that.
Absolutely. Actually, researchers have looked into the phenomenon of pay as much as you want models.
Yes.
And what they've learned so far is that when this option of deciding how much I pay absolutely voluntarily for a cultural ticket, product, service, they tend to give less or even nothing. But as soon as this decision has to be made in interaction with a real person. So if after a great performance, I ask you, or going into Metropolitan Museum, somebody asks, so what do you want to pay? Then the research says that you actually get more than what you would get by the fixed price. So that is another challenge. So we could get a lot of money, but since the asking for money moment is not personalized, you actually don't get that money. Tony, what about, how do you see the skills and competences set? Are we ready as a sector?
I think the skills issue is much more about creative skills than technical skills. Obviously, technical skills in this, the digital transformation of society, in the creative content sector, that's a big issue, but that's an issue much bigger than just the arts and cultural sector. But in our sector specifically, about how we can make the most of these opportunities, the most of the tools that are being invented, that already exist, that's a creative skills issue. It's an understanding of what the opportunities are and the potential. And actually, I think generally, I think there's a long way to go in the cultural sector. And I think that's a lot of the job roles, a lot of way organizations are set up. They're set up to produce physical outputs, exhibitions, theatre shows. So the majority of your amazing talent in organizations is focused on that, has experience in that. And a lot of the leadership is the same. I think rethinking about how the types of job roles, the types of talent, who works in the cultural sector, we need to think differently. We need to think a lot more like broadcasters. We need a lot more talent from that pipeline to come and work, because it's a conceptual, it's a creative, it's far less about technical skills and more about understanding how you work in that space. I've said before that I think the curator of the 21st century will probably be closer to a UX designer than a traditional curator. That's not to say that we won't need traditional curators. Of course, we'll need that academic and intellectual knowledge about art, collections, etc., history. But understanding how you reach audiences, how you create your product, well, that's a different set of skills, and that's a set of creative skills that don't naturally exist in the pipeline for culture. Most people who come and work in culture, not everyone, come from humanities backgrounds, etc., which is great. I come from a humanities background, but luckily, actually, early in my career, I ended up working with people who came from things like broadcast and digital, and they think differently. They think differently about how you reach an audience, what works, what doesn't work. And just to pick up on what Simon was saying about, we are very lucky as these capitals or cities of culture programs to have public money, but not everyone does. And actually, that's why it's really hard. The digital space is full of monopolies. There's a reason why there's only about 3 platforms in the world where all of social media exists, and Netflix is blowing Hollywood out of the water. It's because they have huge money in their monopolies. So what does that mean for the cultural sector, particularly small organizations? Well, it's, again, that same old word, partnership. How does the cultural sector itself work together? How, for example, if you're a small museum, it's going to be very hard for you to produce an immersive experience or a major online broadcast or whatever it might be on your budget, but maybe a consortium of cultural organizations can come together. And even more crucially, partnerships with the commercial sector and with other platforms. We should be thinking about how we might partner with Netflix. In the UK, there's a lot of talk in the UK. We have the world's largest public broadcaster. And for many years, there's a talk about how we bring the cultural sector together with the BBC. So I think partnership, in terms of less is more, that's not to just produce less, that's to produce bigger and better stuff that you genuinely produce really deep, brilliant engagement, really great, high artistic quality. Well, the way of doing that, the way of maximizing budgets, that's working in partnership, not working in silos.
Can I pick up on this? I think you're absolutely right by pointing out that we don't talk about digital skills per se. We really talk about creative skills, or how to change the way we, for example, storytelling. How do we change the way we communicate now differently through new channels? It's not doing the same old thing, just learning about the new channels. And you also mentioned immersive technologies. Now, we also know that with just a regular digital shift, we also see a rapid development in new technologies, augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality. Something that was very, very expensive has become more and more accessible. Not yet maybe fully accessible, but very accessible. And then if you look at many, many cultural institutions, museums, for example, but not only, you see that the way that those institutions have used those digital technologies, even up to the point of just digital screens, maybe touch screens, but not even talking about more advanced stuff, it has really not been changing the way they communicate with the audience. It's rather just a bling bling, some nice thing to have here. It doesn't really elevate the experience. Do you think that this crisis now and more focused on digital shift will see a difference there as well? Or are you not so optimistic?
I'm very optimistic actually in this respect. I mean, in the respect of seeing more people in the cultural sector approaching the opportunities in a more fruitful way, in a more digital first, digitally native way. I mean, I use this example a lot, but it used to make me laugh about 5-10 years ago, when you'd go into an exhibition space and there'd be an iPad on the wall. That for me was a symbol of not getting digital. I think obviously, I think there's a lot of mystification around immersive technologies right now. They're very cool, they're very sexy, everyone wants to play with them. And I'm very lucky right now to be focused on exploring what the possibilities are. But I think you're right. I think we need to, immersive productions, whether that be VR, AR, can be very expensive, but they don't have to be. There's a lot you can do with these technologies. There's a lot of off-the-peg platforms. And again, that's about creativity. We shouldn't over fetishize the technologies themselves. Something as simple as a podcast can be immersive, and it's and this comes back to artists and broadening also. This is another thing that I think, particularly the visual arts world, but all the cultural sector in general needs to think broader about who they term an artist, because working with diverse creative talent from across all of the industries is the way that we're going to push forwards and understand how we use these technologies. And it's always storytellers, creatives, and usually multidisciplinary teams that push forwards how we use these technologies, who invent new ways to use the technologies. Because it's not the technologies themselves, it's how we use them. And again, that's creative skills, that's who are you working with. So I think thinking a little bit differently about, who we term an artist, who we, in the cultural sector, who we work with, how we work with them to use these technologies differently.
Absolutely. There's a museum here in Estonia that I work, that I know very well, and that after renovation had, of course, naturally, like every museum has a lot of digital screens with information, with going more in depth with the layers of information and videos and stuff like that, and the opportunity to actually save some of that information and send it personally to your account, and all that kind of thing. But then after years of use, then the audit was made of how many people actually use it in a meaningful way. Then actually the second level of kind of entering the information, so not just touching once for this to be open, but actually going into what was produced, it was 2% of all the visitors. So, you know, that's how it works. Kalle, Tartu, your take on this. Are we in a way of skill set? Are we in a better position?
I suppose that we have been describing here a good short to medium term arts of survival recipe. As Simon put it, we need the tech people, the people who know how to produce things, how to operate the technology. We as the European Capital of Culture team have been happy this year that we have people who know the kind of digital production basics. But even more, as Tony put it, we need storytelling and people who really understand to whom we are speaking and who craft the story to be targeted at the people whom we want to speak to, and also it must match the medium or the what the technology allows us to do, and sometimes the story or our will to do something great even bends the technology, and this is where we can push the innovation of technology. That's the short to medium term recipe, perhaps. But I'm fascinated by an article which said that we are in a situation where event management, meaning also cultural management or sharing cultural experiences, is going through a similar process as listening and paying for music online. And if we think how long it took from the Napster to Spotify, it was like a 10-year plus journey until we got the kind of working solutions which are really easy to use and people are happily willing to give money to experience culture in return. Then I kind of like fear that it's a long journey, and in 10 years we will only have really kind of immerse Zoom or virtual exhibition experiences or something like that. So that sounds a bit negative. I don't want to use 10 years any outdated and not very interesting technology on the screens, which I want to close and go outside to the forest and so on. So perhaps like this jump will happen quicker. So I'm a positive person. Yeah, I hope that this advancement in technology happens quicker, and even more, I hope that we will have a lot of the luxury of real life, seeing each other, talking to each other, and having a beer in a pub or meeting at the art exhibition or at the concert. This is something I really look forward to, and I think that's not impossible to have it in our future.
Well, Kalle, we are 400 meters apart.
That feeds my optimism, you see.
There are a few questions. I actually wanted to ask you those questions from our listeners or viewers, and maybe you can choose who can answer these questions better. Andrea is asking that she believes that there's also a major shift in the offline with the all external environment to mostly home, especially now with the winter approaching. Is there a way for museums, or maybe we can look at cultural institutions at large, is there a way for cultural institutions to enter people's homes, not only digitally, but as physical presence in some way? Anyone?
I can jump
Tony.
in. I think what I kind of suppose was getting at, again, thinking about, this crowded marketplace that is the digital space, and the fact that after a long day on Zoom or whatever it is you're doing, you don't want to sit in front of your laptop. And if you are going to sit in front of a screen, it'll probably be Netflix. I think even when we go back to normal and we can go back to going to the pub and going to the museums, etc., people will still be consuming digital content. They already were before. Of course they were. When you're cooking your tea, you listen to a podcast. When you go for a walk, you listen to Spotify. It's those types of experiences or those types of rituals, if you like, that are opportunities for cultural producers to insert their content into. I think we need to think about what is the role of culture in someone's life, not just in the broad sense, but in terms of their daily life. It's not unusual to think about what's the role of television in your daily life. You think, well, maybe I'll watch it for half an hour in the morning when I'm getting ready. I'll watch the news, or maybe I watch this show regularly in the evenings. Well, actually, it's thinking like that about culture. I consume, like most people in the world, huge amounts of audio, whether that be radio, whether that be music service, streaming, podcasts. Well, it's thinking about that, and that can be through partnerships with existing YouTube channels, podcasters, platforms, broadcasters, or producing your own really high quality. And then when you get to that next stage, and I think someone put in the questions, the blending of digital and physical spaces and nature and the environment. Well, I'm just thinking, well, behind me, I've got a Miro. If you can't put your Miro exhibition on right now, or you've got your Miro exhibition on in the future when you can, well, there's nothing stopping you telling a wonderful story about Miro and his love for nature by creating a podcast that you experience that might only be 5 minutes long in nature. Could you combine AR content with that? Could it be 3D sound? It's thinking about how storytelling, essentially, which is what we all do, communicate history, communicate culture, how we can insert that into people's daily lives in ways that they genuinely want to do. And that already fit with existing, what you might say, consumer rituals, consumer habits. You sit on the bus or you sit on the tube, and most people have got their headphones in. Well, that's where you can get people if you can create really good content. And we should be really bold. I mean, museums, art galleries, theaters, artists, cultural producers, we have the best content in the world. We just need to get better at presenting it in this new world.
Do you have any practical examples of this happening as well from UK or anywhere else?
There's a lot of examples of, and I keep using, I either use this kind of silly phrase quite a lot at the minute, because with some of the work that I'm doing, but hacking existing content forms. The podcast has been around for ages. How do you hack that? There's massive opportunities. How could a podcast, BBC have a team called BBC R&D, and they just released a kind of prototype project for Halloween called Monster. And it's essentially a podcast, but it's the creative in that use the podcast format, a platform, or whatever you want to call it, to transform someone's house, the listener's house, into a haunted house. There's a brilliant idea. There's a brilliant example. I'm thinking a lot, how do you hack the video podcasts, for example? Because you can essentially create a theater experience using, mobile content, video, 360 video. You don't even need to have a VR headset. 360 video on YouTube, but that you watch when you're in real places. It's thinking, again, it's not so much technical skills, although they are important, but they come through other pipelines. It's that creative understanding of how you can manipulate, make the most of, hack the technologies, the platforms, the tools that already exist. And thinking about how that, again, how does that fit into someone's life? And that, again, that overused word, experience. How do you create an experience, even if it's only 5 minutes long, that is really, really high quality and of value, and that fits into somebody's life?
Thank you. I think Kalle would like to add as well.
I would add the idea that it can also be movement in the other direction, not the museum or concert hall coming to the home in some other way, but perhaps also the family sending something to the museum. The Estonian National Museum, situated here in Tartu, they, for example, had this campaign where they invited people to send documents about the corona reality, photos, done even with the mobile phone, stories, whatever forms where people could express themselves, share their, fun things, worries, and so on. And it's a simple tool. And also in the similar vein, there are the Instagram pages also collecting and sharing the, corona everyday funny and sometimes sad reality. And this is a process which also involves people and families as creators and museum builders themselves, a kind of small tool or a method, perhaps.
What about education? Because we know that not only culture has been going through a major a tectonic shift, but also education. And there's a question from Raluca in our board here, on our board. How, in your opinion, can cultural actors support the educational experience of children, preschool and at the school, in order to bring value to the teaching experiences, methods and resources? There is already a lot of digitized material, a heritage, visual, audio, video, but is it used nowadays in schools, she asks, during the pandemic? Arts in education as creative partnerships was an important action area for cultural educators and mediators. And how is this sector adapting to the way of schools, the way the schools is working now? So do you have any examples or stories of arts and education combined in this hybrid classrooms and hybrid education as we are living now? Anyone? Kalle?
I could perhaps share the story. One thing that I was kindly asked, that, you know, like a positive story about the kind of innovation and development in Estonia during the COVID pandemic. The museum education or museums working in cooperation with teachers, they seem to have a good experience of networking and coming together and really discussing. The bigger museums have the people who design also the online materials that can be shared to the teachers of local schools, regional, national schools. And those digital blogs or tours or whatever galleries became very handy because everywhere in Europe, I suppose, the teachers were under a really tough pressure because they had to handle all the technical questions of bringing everyone in the Zoom lessons or whichever other platform they used. And so all sorts of helps which were given by the cultural institutions were very handy. And that was something that was stressed to me, that the museum pedagogues have been quite successful in Estonia. I'm perhaps not the target group to evaluate the content of different examples, but I see this positive experience from there. Checking also a few of the tours, I see that they can be very different. Some are just galleries of pictures, and some have more of these aspects which Toni stressed earlier about the storytelling and really thinking how to creatively make this topic interesting. Because in the end, the kid is at home behind the computer, looks at the website, and as children visit all sorts of websites with engaging content, they also want the museum education page to be engaging. So that's kind of universal thing that people want.
Mm-hmm. Toni, what about culture in UK? Culture and the link between culture and education.
I suppose it depends what we mean. I think there's do we mean on the side of education for skills and entry into the cultural sector as a career path? That's one thing. And I think there's a lot that we can do, and that's around thinking differently about the roles we have in the cultural sector, thinking very differently about who can do those roles and where they come from, what backgrounds they need and what backgrounds they don't need in terms of education, how we support. I think one thing the cultural sector is quite bad at, and that's just a money thing, a resource thing, which is a very difficult thing to solve, is I went into the cultural sector out of uni, straight out of university, and compared to my friends who went into into law and other private sector professions, they not only did they earn a hell of a lot more money, but they got a lot more training. In the private sector, they value their staff, and we value our staff as well. But we have to think a bit more creatively, because we don't have the same budgets and resource, about how we can really train and offer opportunities to develop young people when they come into the cultural sector. That's really important, because it's, you know, all these skills, you know, you cannot just expect people to arrive fully formed. You know, that we need to think how we can better develop and retain talent in the cultural sector. But in terms of education and how, you know, we engage with education, particularly what an educational remit might be for a theatre or for a museum, particularly public institutions, I think, again, it comes back to what I was saying about content. Teachers themselves are very, very overworked, you know, have a very difficult time, particularly now. So if we want them to use our materials, we want to help teachers to incorporate our content and our stories into their curricula, we need to make that job easy for them. And that's about really great content, you know, really great, really great, easy to use. You know, I have friends who are teachers, and brilliant video content, you know, that they can show in the class is like gold dust. You know, friends that have children, you know, they watch certain YouTube channels or they engage with certain content. Young children are going to be way ahead of us when it comes to how you use mobile technologies, immersive technologies, because they're already doing it. You know, my little nephew is far more adept at me than using a VR headset, because he's a gamer. So it's thinking about content of all levels and types and scales that can be very easily used in schools, because, you know, again, it's thinking about how we fit into daily life, whether that be school routine, working life, whatever it might be. It's thinking like that.
Mm-hmm. This correlates very much with what you said earlier, that this is not just putting your material out there and then hoping that somebody uses it, but actually making sure that what you do and the way you produce it makes it easier for them to use it, and then actually to carry out their own duties in terms of teachers. There's a follow-up question to you, actually, from one of our viewers. They say that what you said earlier about the digitalization is really important. The decision makers in many countries, as well as in the sector, still think that digitizing collections in museums and performances is enough. Just the fact of digitalization. Are funding institutions in UK already advanced in this understanding? How and what they support in order to stimulate that digital shift? Or are you alone in that thinking?
Sorry, I feel like I was being a bit harsh about, you know, digitization is really important, of course. You know, museums are built on collections. Museums are collections, and there's been a massive thing. And I come from museums, and there's been a massive, obviously, drive to make sure that collections are digitally accessible, and that is an amazing resource. Having, you know, image reproductions, possibly 360 video reproductions, if you can do it, of sculptures, you know, history. Having essentially doing that is really important, because it's a great resource to ensure that accessibility for everyone, the whole of society, artists, educationalists, whoever. But that's not your content strategy. That, in a sense, is your base. And it's a really difficult thing to say, because that in itself is really expensive, really hard to do. Many people struggle to do it. Again, I think that should be done, you know, through partnership. You know, there's a lot of interesting approaches to that in the UK by museums, how you might collaborate with Wikipedia, for example, who are already doing it for you. So user-generated digitization and things like that. But that's not, we shouldn't kid ourselves. People are not going and spending lots of time on, you know, digital archives online. They just aren't. So it is really important to have that. And it's, you know, thinking creatively about how you do that, because that will form the basis of then how you tell the stories from that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think this could be already one of those conclusions of today as well. And I think this is really important, that it's not just doing what you've always done and then just streaming it online in whatever quality it is. It is really thinking deliberately of your channels and understanding that what you do and the way you do in physical unplugged life might be very different of what you do in digital life. They're both important, and as we can join in a hybrid way of both experiences in the future, that's probably the way forward. It's not going to be one or another. It's going to one supporting another. But I would like to start the last group of questions, and I will start with Simon, with you. So the last question of group is that these discussions have been about cities. It's about cities or the organizations, culture capital, cities of culture, institutions. And we now talk a lot about what culture, what creatives need to do and the way that they could develop their creative skills in order to be more relevant and maybe more successful in this new digital environment. But what is the role for you guys? What are the role of the city of Coventry, or the city of the culture city of Coventry, or city of Tartu, or the culture capital program, or for Ljubljana, or the debate for Ljubljana 2025, or Kino Šiška? What can you do to support creatives and audiences in this term? Simon.
No, I'll go a little bit back because of the question of education. It is the part, of course, of the audience development. We all know that it's very, very important thing. But on the other side, as Tommy and your conclusion was just this question. So if we have tools, we must use it in creative way. If we know how to do that, that is very important. We will have also the part of educational block to rethink all of the context of the cultural or artistic content. And it's very important, you know, that's the reason how to reach the audience, I can say. And also, it is the only reason how to get the feedback of the audience, not only in local area, but also in global way of thinking. It is also very important to ask what to do with the public infrastructure in these crazy times. We decided in Kino Šiška that we will open the infrastructure to the artists, to young professionals, to get the experience how to produce the event and such things and such things. So there will be open call next year. It's very important. It's very important also for community, because event is only the part we see, but we cannot touch in real, because all things are in the backstage. They are not on the stage. So these skills, and yes, it is not enough to have technical skills. We must be very, very creative. We probably, as Tommy said, and I think it's very important, you know, to get the broadcasters, probably public broadcasters. So public services Slovenia is the biggest cultural institution, radio television of Slovenia, that we get the partnerships, because it's very important media still, and have much better content to just put it to the audiences.
Kalle, what can Tartu and the Capital of Culture program do to support or to facilitate some of the changes?
Capital of Culture, we think of it as a tool or as a platform for change, reform, for drive, and part of it is also the empowerment or the education, the trainings that we offer to the culture managers. And we also offer an arena for ideas, for new productions, and we can also shape the size of this arena. If we see that it must be more digital, if we see that it must be more thinking about that people would not be so tightly together, the arena must be built differently in all the senses. We can also shape that so that everyone got a secure and as good experience as possible. And as the European Capital of Culture, we also have the role of being spokespersons. We explain processes in the culture. We explain COVID is only one of the challenges Tartu and Southern Estonia have when it comes to culture, participation, audiences, reputation, all sorts of things. So we are the facilitator in many ways, and we also are adapting to the current situation and crisis. I must say that 1 year ago we had the Arts of Survival headline and plans which were somewhat different than now. Now we still have the Arts of Survival headline, but we also have had to adapt, and we are running at the moment 1 year incubation for the first projects which were presented in our European Capital of Culture beat book. We took the projects, each has a project manager, an institution or a curator or a producer, and all of them entered this 1 year incubation, where we are going to discuss very thoroughly to whom they are producing these events, by whom, with whom, what is the budget, what are the marketing and communication plans, and also the risk analysis. And next May, we are going to evaluate, our creative council is going to evaluate the plans we together with the managers created. And I'm pretty sure that these plans will already take into account the current reality or the reality that we see coming. So we have a number of ways how we are coping with the situation and trying to offer the best possible experience for the audiences.
Very good. Tony, in this area where lots of emphasis are on the creative sector, creative professionals, companies, what can city, what role can or a program like UK City of Culture play?
I think at the heart of it, these programs are about collaboration, cross-sector collaboration, collaboration between public cultural organizations and programs, institutions, but also with civic organizations, local government, universities, educational organizations, third sector organizations, charities, and the like. And actually, we all know we're stronger together. We all have different skills and different strengths, but they're all needed to deliver real change, particularly when thinking about how you transform certain sectors. So what's been a real privilege in this job is working with the whole of civic society in Coventry and the West Midlands region, trying to explore how we work together. It's really tricky. Everyone works in different ways, speaks different languages, but to really transform, as you say, to make an impact on society, but particularly thinking about transforming these industries, growing the cultural sector, growing the creative sector. That's about collaboration together, and whether that be working with government initiatives around skills training, upskilling, thinking about all of the different actors in civic society as part of a pipeline, essentially, from schools and education through training, through the private sector. How can you work together? And thinking a lot, for example, in the culture sector, a lot of what we do is essentially commissioning cultural products, whether that be artistic works, theatre productions, exhibitions. How can that commissioning process be attached or linked to this pipeline, whether that be an educational skills and training pipeline? How can it link to distribution and public engagement pipelines like broadcasters? Thinking a lot more holistically about society and how we work together, rather than everybody trying to do everything start to finish themselves. And I think that's how we'll maximize resource. I think that's how we'll broaden opportunity. And I think that's how we'll make a much bigger impact. So there's a lot to learn from all of these different initiatives, but I think they're really valuable because they're about experimenting in each individual context, how we work cross-sector. And I think that's really important to the survival and growth of the cultural sector and beyond.
What a beautiful way to finish. In one of the early discussions back in April, when governments around Europe were still discussing on support packages, etc., and kind of focusing on essential sectors to support, and culture not being often part of that somebody in this circle said very pointedly that if you think that these lockdowns are difficult, try those lockdowns with zero culture, with no film, no music, no podcast, no nothing. And then you see what a real lockdown is. So I think that we are still now, when the second wave of lockdowns is coming or already underway, that we still need to remind the policymakers as well, decision makers, that culture is not just a nice thing to have, but part of essentials in times when people need that kind of both physical but also mental security and stability in their life and enjoyment. Anyway, thank you Coventry, thank you Tartu, thank you Ljubljana for being part of this today. And I give the floor back to Ines.
Thank you, Ragnar. And thank you, Simon, Tony, and Kalle. Really, it's really important, what you said, that culture is an essential part. And I will take this opportunity as well to conclude with one comment from our audience, because it is also important. Uroš, who is working in the theater, said that he wants to spend time in the same space with other people. There is simply no innovative way to use technology as a substitute for a life experience. And this is really important thing. So we need a life experience as well. But we all agree that, before we all zoom out and go to this survival mode, we still need to somehow survive and stay in contact with our audience. So therefore, we need to use this digital space in a way, an innovative way, or just in order to stay and survive this lockdowns and everything. So thank you all, and hopefully we will see each other someday after the crisis live somewhere at some cultural event, and hopefully we will see each other online as well next year when we will continue with these talks on Plan B. So thank you, everybody. See you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're all invited to Coventry next year.